Welcome to War Thunder. What's up, dude? How y'all doing? Back on the War Thunder 1.95 dev server. And I'm going to take a bit of time now to run down through the attacker and bombers that are listed for the Swedish tech tree. We're going to start off with the B3 Charlie, or B3C. We'll take a look at her real quick. And what we have here is the Ju-86 Swedish rendition. The Ju-86 should have been put into the German lineup a long time ago. It wasn't. Get over it. So, what we have is a Swedish copy. I say copy, that's not a polite way of putting it. This is the export version with a different type of engine. It runs on the Bristol Pegasus engine, 9-cylinder. This is a indigenously built, licensed copy of the Bristol Pegasus. What you've got is a 4-man crew, and it's armed but not very heavily. One 8mm in the front, one in the belly, and one in the dorsal, ventral and dorsal. They are, well, rifle caliber. The armor, non-existent. Hiccups, I hate those. Bomb loads. The M40, 4 of them. They are 260 kilogram bombs. We can carry a torpedo. And the 250 kilogram bombs. And you get a standard 50 kilogram bomb. 16 of them. So, just so that you're aware, this plane, the German variant, the Ju-86, was mostly used as a high-altitude recon plane. Not really so much as a bomber. And the reason it was used as a recon plane is because it could get up to a very high altitude. And it could go along at a pretty good clip. And it wasn't until about 1942 or 1943 that Britain had aircraft that were capable of climbing up to it and catching it. And when I say that, I mean, the altitude that this thing is capable of getting to is 26,000. Well, I believe the German one was able to tool along at about 39,000. I might be wrong, but it was because it was using German engines. And at that altitude, it could cook along at a pretty good clip and keep its tail feathers out of the reach of British fighters. That pretty much came to a screeching halt with the introduction of the P-51B and C and the P-47s. America, they love that high altitude to sit up on top of everybody and come screaming down on them. Yep. The P-47 could actually catch this thing easily. And the P-51s were the same. The British Spitfires, they became capable of it with the high altitude version, which we still don't have in game. The high altitude version has an extended wing, which, although not very useful, would still be something to add to the game. We'll go back now. Next, we come down to the B-17A, and no, this is not your daddy's B-17. This is your Swedish daddy's B-17. As you can see, it carries a couple of bombs under each wing. You've got 8mm machine gun, another 8mm machine gun, and another 8mm machine gun. Let's just take a look at the X-ray. One 8mm, two 8mm, three 8mm. Fuel tank, and a 958 horsepower engine. This is not going to be your screaming beast. Matter of fact, you'll probably end up with more people screaming because they're in the beast. Modifications, bomb load. 9 50-kilogram bombs, one 220-kilogram bomb, 4 50-kilogram bombs and 120-kilogram bomb, one 500-kilogram bomb. This plane is a tier 2, rank 2, is probably going to be a bit above its battle weight. It probably should be a rank 1 plane. It's not very fast, 256 miles an hour. It's going to make itself a pretty easy target. Unless it's got maneuverability out the yin-yang that nobody is aware of at this time. Armor, not a lot. You've got some for the gunner, which is amazing, and some for the pilot, and only from behind. And that is the B-17A. Not to be confused with the Boeing B-17A. Then we have the B-18A. Not to be confused with the B-18 Bolo of the Americans. And this has that wonderful Soviet style, the canopy and pilot's position is off center, which I've never understood, although it does help with forward vision while taxiing, on one side at least. Go to the X-ray. Again, the 958 horsepower engines, 2 of them. And a 13.2 millimeter machine gun. And that's the gunner, and another 13.2 millimeter machine gun. So it can somewhat defend itself. 276 miles an hour, it's not going to defend itself for long. Armor, looks like they've got some pretty good armor for the pilot and gunners. Modifications. Well, you got 18 50-kilogram bombs, 320 kilogram bombs, 8 50 kilogram bombs, and 320 kilogram bombs, 2 500 kilogram bombs, a 2 500 kilogram bombs, and 8 50 kilogram bombs. No torpedoes for this one. Now we go to the B-15 or B-18B. And we still have the 13.2 millimeter, another 13.2 millimeter. We have inline Daimler-Benz DB605Bs, water-cooled, 1336 horsepower, and a considerable increase in speed to 341 miles an hour. And your altitude has also gone up to 32,800. The armor is still pretty good at protecting. 10 millimeters all the way around. Modifications. A considerable increase in the number of weapons. Rockets and bombs. My goodness. 12 rockets with 500 millimeters of pen. Whew! That's going to hurt. That's going to hurt bad. And rockets and bombs. 600 kilogram bomb times 2. Along with rockets. And these rockets are no joke. Interesting. But again, it's got that off-center cockpit arrangement a la Soviet style. Think year 2. Wouldn't be a bad medium bomber. But that is pretty much it for the bomber lines. I mean, we don't have any higher ranked bombers. The Swedes decided to go and make their fighters into attackers, fighter bombers. The J-29s fill that niche very well. The Lansen is definitely a fighter bomber. And they do that for a couple of reasons. And these are only suppositions, so take them at at your leisure. But basically, they're saying with a bomber, you need a big runway, a long runway that is a easy target. The Swedes, the Finns, the Nords, or Norwegians, I'm not sure which one is the correct terminology, basically decided, well, those big, easily targeted runways, why don't we make it so that we can take off from a roadway? Well, you can't take one of these big bombers over and land it on a roadway. But you can land a fighter on a roadway. And they proved it many times. You can look through YouTube and you can find all sorts of videos of the Swedes going out. They take down the signs along the 2-lane highway or 4-lane highway, and they'll bring in a Draken or a Viggen or whatever their newest one is. They'll land it, they'll service it, they'll turn it around, and then they'll take off. And that's because they have very good lift characteristics. Blah, blah, blah. Mouth and brain not working together. I don't know about the Draken. The Draken still strikes me as you're going to need a bunch of runway. But the Lanson can get off the ground pretty easily. And the J-29s can get off the ground pretty easily. And back in the original days of NATO, that's what they were doing. They would practice on using runways made out of local highways. And they still do that today. And that's pretty much it. Now, I know there's supposed to be some tankage, although I haven't got a clue as to what tanks there are. Oh yeah, the M60A3 TTS. Preview that real quick. Yep, it's got ERA. I think this is the same type of tank that the Marine Corps was using during the first Gulf War. Had the 105 and the applied ERA. Take a look at Germany. And doesn't look like they added anything new to Germany. USSR. Doesn't look like they added anything to the USSR. Britain. Oh yeah, the Rukat. Take a look at that real quick. Or is it Rukat or Ruikat? It's a good looking armored fighting vehicle. I'm going to call it an armored fighting vehicle because I really don't want to call it a tank. It's not. If we look at the armor, it's like, yeah, it might stop a 50 cal, and it might not. It definitely isn't going to stop a 20 mil or a 25 millimeter. Now, the nose is going to be somewhat okay. 30 millimeters. But then again, you've got areas where you got 10 millimeters. .25 millimeters on the side, 20 millimeters up above. The turret's got 25 millimeters all the way around. The roof is 15 millimeters. You're going to be penned from the roof by diving aircraft. X-ray, you got a 76 millimeter GT4 cannon, 48 rounds, 8.7 second reload. Ammo. Interesting drivetrain, all-wheel drive. Radiator, the engine, 501 horsepower. Optics. Driver, gunner, loader, commander. "75 miles an hour" means it will get up and go and get there quickly. I would suggest if you're going to use something like this, it's got a 3-inch gun. Let's look at the modifications. It's got an APFSDS, armor piercing, fin stabilized, discarding sabot. It's got enough penetration to go through darn near anything from the side. It's also got an explosive round. Armor piercing effect not very high, but it carries, what is that? Just about a kilogram of explosive. TNT equivalent, that is. Can only penetrate 14 millimeters, but hey, against a soft target, doesn't need to be very big. But that fin stabilized discarding sabot round, yeah, that's going to be a needle in a haystack, or a needle through the haystack. Night vision devices. For those of you that drive tanks, this will probably be something you're looking forward to. Japanese Type 90B. Take a look real quick. I'm not sure what's changed. Those of you that are tankers, I'm sure you'll know exactly what's changed. Go to the X-ray. 120 millimeter L44 smoothbore gun. Targeting speed 18 degrees a second, 2.2 degrees a second vertical guidance. Clearance, vertical guidance on the gun. Yeah. -7 to +10. Auto loader. It's got composite, so modifications, smoke generator, smoke grenades, APFSDS is going to punch through a lot of things. Heat FS, high explosive anti-tank, fin stabilized. That's a boom round. Now there's an interesting thing. How many of you know what this is? This little mast. I'll give you a hint. It deals with fire control. I'll give you another hint. It deals with atmospheric conditions. Go back. Let's go on. Let's take a look at Italy. Let's see if they got anything new. Nifty, neat, and wonderful. And I see nothing. Let's go to France. Does not appear that there's anything new in the French line. And the Swedish. We have two. We have the SAV 2012-48. Okay. We're going to take a look at this one. And no, I'm not going to order it. Preview. Now, for those of you that are looking at it, do not be looking at it for armor. This thing has nothing. Rifle calibers will penetrate this. Yeah, rifle calibers will penetrate this from the side. From the front, you're basically going to be taken down by just about any autocannon in the game. Here's where you really learn what this thing is capable of. Cannon breech, 120 millimeter automat cannon. It has 62 rounds on board. Its reload rate is 1.2 seconds. It has an auto loader. And the way this thing loads. Okay, hopefully I'm back and we're going to continue talking. What you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds. Those 6 rounds are your first stage ammo storage of the auto loader. The auto loader. This is a rank 2 battle rating 3.7 120 millimeter gun with an auto loader with a 1.2 second reload. This is not affected by the gunner. This is the speed at which it will reload the gun for 6 rounds. Then it's going to be a while before the gunner or loader can refill that magazine. Hang on a minute. I've got a cat that's crying and whining, so I have to deal with him. Just a moment. I will never understand cats. They come in, go out. Never going to understand them. Okay, but the reload rate on this magazine, all 6 rounds, is going to be a long time. So you might be able to put a hurt on somebody quickly, but when you're out of bullets, you best be hiding until you get it reloaded. Modifications. The armor-piercing ballistic capped shell has a muzzle velocity of 525 meters a second. It's like throwing a softball. If you don't know what a softball is, look it up. 95 millimeters of pen. At 500 meters, it's 89 millimeters. If it gets through, it's got a pretty good pretty good charge. It's straight TNT, so there's no equivalent. 980 grams or 890 grams. And then there's the explosive round, which again is TNT, same velocity, 525 meters a second, and it's got 2.25 kilograms of explosive mass. It will leave a lot of things in smoldering wrecks. Yeah, 28 millimeters a pen really doesn't seem like a lot until you rip somebody's turret off. Other than that, it looks relatively good. But again, there's no armor. Top speed, 35 miles an hour. It's 20 tons. It's got a 568 horsepower engine. So it's not going to lack for power. And let me see. What's the gun elevation and depression? It's minus 10 to 25 degrees. So getting this thing into a position where you're hull down and shooting over a rise, you got a minus 10 degree tilt. You might be able to do it pretty good with that. Now let's take a look at the STRV 103-0. This is the S-Tank, or the Stank, as I grew up learning to describe it. This tank's been around for quite some time. It was only recently pulled out. Well, not recently, but it only came out of inventory not that long ago. Now, irrespective of the fact that it has no turret, this is not a tank destroyer. It is a tank. And that gun is not held down in place with this band over it. That's a slide. It's a guide, if you will. When the gun recoils, they don't remove that to let the gun recoil. The gun recoils in that sleeve. Now, the adjustments, they showed it on the War Thunder stream of how they would adjust the aim with this thing. I don't drive tanks, so I'm not going to even try to figure it out. But you've got a solid shot, armored piercing, discarding sabot, 300 millimeters. What is that? Hesh. Another APDS. And an explosive round. 120 millimeter gun. It's got good velocity. 1478. So it's relatively flat shooting. Now let's take a look at the gun. This is an L74 gun. The gun's length is 74 calibers. Think about that for a minute. The gun length on the Abrams is 44 calibers. Granted, it's 120 millimeter, but it's still only a 44 caliber. Calibers is the diameter of the shell versus the length of the barrel. So 105 millimeters will go into the length of this barrel 74 times. Whereas with the Abrams, the 120 millimeters will go into the length of the barrel 44 times. This is a high-speed, low-drag death machine. That gun is designed for long-range shooting. Long-range and accurate shooting. It uses NATO ammunition. And it's squeezing every last erg of energy out of the propellant to make the count, or make the shell count when it hits. And it is an auto loader. It's got 50 rounds of ammunition, and it has 25 here and 25 here. One side is normally filled with armor-piercing rounds. The other side is filled with a mix of rounds, various types, probably HESH and high explosive. And you can break that up any way you want to. 2 engines. There's an engine, and there's an engine. You're wondering, they look different. They are different. Here's a transmission. You've got one transmission. You've got a gearbox. You've got both engines attached to the gearbox. One engine is a diesel, 683 horsepower. The other engine is a turbine. Yes, I said that right, a turbine engine. Now, during the Thunder Show, they explained the reason behind the diesel and the turbine engine. They both use the same ammo or same fuel, but the reason they've got a diesel and a turbine is because a turbine is easier to start in the extreme cold of the north. During the winters, it can get downright chilly. So to overcome the starting issues, they've got one engine that's a turbine engine. Similar, considerably easier to start. Warms up the rest of the tank, and then you can run the diesel. And they are both attached to the transmission. Now, you're not seeing a driver. Well, there's a driver, and there's the commander, who is also a driver and a gunner. And this guy, he's the loader. And not just the loader, but the radioman. He's more of a radioman than a loader. And the only thing he really controls is the smoke grenade launcher. Now, you saw the 2 machine guns that are right there. I don't know how useful those are going to be. But this tank does some weird articulation. It can nose down, nose high, to give you your elevations with the gun. Minus 10 degrees and plus 12 degrees. But the gun does not swivel left and right at all. To do that, you go to gun aim, in the setup, and as you move the gun sight, the tank will turn and tilt. Got that? This is a very different tank. And if you can look at it like this, look at the armor. Wow, 40 millimeters on the front, but the equivalent angle is 182 millimeters with a slope of 79 degrees. And the bottom is 176 millimeters with a slope of 72 degrees. It's going to be hard to punch a bullet through either of these unless you catch it right there. No, that's all constructional. But you have it. There you have it. The S tank, or the stank. An interesting addition to the game. One that actually might be worth driving out and playing with a little bit. Sort of like the Merkava is an interesting tank to drive out and play with a little bit. All right. I'm going to call that quits for the day. This is Subdude signing out. Y'all have a pleasant today, a better tomorrow, and we'll catch you in the skies in Air Realistic on the good maps. Goodbye, folks.